Hey family, it's Getty here from Not Finished Yet. I'm over here riding my bicycle, enjoying the day. This is quite a serious video. I'm gonna be talking about when I had my first ever LSD trip and it left me shaking before God, repenting. So, I mistakenly made the choice to partake in drug use even as a born again Christian. I have quite a complex story about my history with using certain substances. I started the first time I used marijuana, cannabis, ganja, whatever you want to call it. I was 15 years old and I smoked with my older brother and a friend of his. I still remember that day when I first tried marijuana. And I started to smoke consistently as a young teenager, and I smoked weed for years as a teen. And then when I became born again, when I became a Christian, I gave my life to Jesus. I actually experienced a deliverance from using substances. So God took that away. I remember clearly it was one of those transformations that are just undeniable. And He took away the desire to smoke, to drink. So I wasn't using weed anymore. I was a different person, no longer cussing, no longer hanging out with the bad kids, no longer rebelling. So He took away that desire of smoking and drinking, stuff like that. Um, so I felt good. I felt good going to church consistently, multiple days a week, going to youth group, going to services. And I felt good with my new kind of life, that freedom that came with that. But this is what happened, guys. And I'm going to make a more in depth video about this because I remember when I was in a foster home, one day, one of the other kids there had offered me some weed again. And like I said, I was delivered. I wasn't smoking weed anymore. But I actually fell into the temptation that day. When he offered me that weed, he made it sound so inviting. He made it sound so tempting that I fell for it. I said, okay, yeah, why not? I don't have school today. It's a Friday. I'm at home. I got nothing really to do. I'll smoke with you. So I smoked weed again after I was offered it in that temptation. And that opened a door for me to continue back on smoking weed almost every day. I became addicted again. I became really hooked on smoking weed. So here I am as a Christian, back addicted to weed, and that followed me for 10 years. That carried on in my life for over 10 years as a Christian. So as a Christian, I was smoking weed practically every single day, and that also just opened up the vulnerability to do other things, to do other drugs. That's when I first, how I got introduced to this LSD or acid, the psychedelic drug. One of the guys that I was buying weed from, had told me about, he said, you gotta try this LSD. It was like the best experience that I've ever had. And I was like intrigued, my interest was piqued. I said, okay, hook me up, how do I get this LSD? So he gave me a connection for a guy who was selling the LSD. I contacted him. He came to the door, dropped it off in the car. I got like 3 tabs of LSD. And this guy, I've never done this before. This was like a whole new thing. So he tells me, oh yeah, take 2 tabs for, to full the full experience. Take 2 tabs of the LSD. So I'm like, okay, well, I'm gonna take 2 tabs then. I was staying at my friend's house, hanging out, and this was also a Christian. We were just in rebellion in that way because we were smoking weed together. Still, like, almost you could say carnal Christians, lukewarm Christians. We were participating in things that we shouldn't have. So we'd be smoking weed together, even as Christians, brothers in Christ. And I had taken the 2 tabs of LSD. He comes in the room. I offer him the other tab of LSD. I remember clearly like how it all went down. There's those little paper tabs of the LSD, and it had like a skeleton key on the tab. So I give him one of the tabs, and I just like it starts to kick in a little while. But like I had like a bizarre, it was demonic experience because as the LSD started to kick in, I remember I was in the shower and I just start getting this laugh. I was just start laughing from the pit of my stomach, but it was like this demonic. It was almost like the devil was laughing through me. He's like laughing, like, I got you. You took this LSD. It's like a demonic sound and laugh that just started manifesting out of me. And and that's what I could like contribute it to. It was like the devil was laughing at me, but it was coming through me. So it was very dark and weird, but I didn't really think too much of it. Um, so like I said, I gave my friend the other tab. It starts kicking in. This is my first time experience. As it starts kicking in, like I'm looking at him and I'm like, dude, like I'm looking up at the ceiling. I'm like, dude, do you see like the ceiling? It kind of looks like it's melting or whatever. So like it's just this is the trip started to kick in. And at first, this is the deception of it, because at first it felt like a really like livid, exciting, almost amazing kind of experience. Like I was playing a video game at his house, and the car in the video game starts flying over some water. I was just totally tripping out. Like the car in the game starts flying over water. It's like some of the depictions you might see in movies, or like um, videos or whatever, like how they make these psychedelic drugs out to be. Um, so I'm also like staring. I remember I was staring at the walls because the walls started to look almost like a Pac-Man type of maze on the walls, and I'm just like out of my mind, tripping, staring at the bedroom walls, looking at the patterns, feeling like I'm in a video game or something. And like I said, it just felt exciting at the moment. It felt like I was coming alive in a new dimensional way. I stepped outside. It was playing, and it had rained, or it was still raining at the time. I step outside. I'm splashing in the puddles. I feel like a kid again. So that's like I said, like it's almost deceptive in that way, where it can make you think like you're having a good time. You feel like a kid again, whatever. Um, but it also brought some kind of paranoia. Like it was like 2 a.m. I'm outside in the driveway, splashing around in some puddles. We're having a good time, me and my friend. And I see a car driving by, and I was like, I was gonna go next to the street, where the car was driving, but then I turned around and ran towards the house because I was scared of this car seeing me because it was so late, and I didn't want them to like know I was high, because you can obviously tell someone's eyes are really dilated. Um, so I'm like, oh, I don't want this car to see me. They're gonna know I'm high. I got a little paranoid, got a little scared. I run back. Like I said, I was enjoying it for a moment. Like I was enjoying it for a time because I was like looking at the walls. I was looking at the patterns. Was having some revelations. Then next thing I know, I'm staring at the floor, like I'm looking at some dirt on the floor, and I'm just like, oh, bewildered. I'm like, oh, look at this, look at this dirt on the floor, like looks so cool, like look at this, man. And then that's when the trip turned, like, had a dark turn, because like I kind of snapped back into reality. I come down from the trip and I'm just like kneeling on the floor looking at some dirt, and I'm like, what am I doing? Like, this just feels weird. Like, what am I even doing right now? So I stand up and I go into my friend's room. I open the bedroom door, and the lights are off and whatever. As I open the door, this guy, he just starts screaming. He starts like screaming, like a blood curdling scream, and I'm like, like, what's going, like I got scared at that moment, and I run to my friend. We run towards each other and we just embrace. Like, we're just like, we hug each other, because like we're like, oh man, like this is crazy. Like, we needed to hug each other to have that comfort and support. And at that moment, we start repenting. We're like shaking. Our bodies are trembling. We're trembling before God, realizing what we have just done. And we're crying out to God as we're embraced. Like, we're embracing each other, and we're standing there in the room, and we're like crying out to God in repentance. We're like, God, forgive us for what we did. Like, we like say, like, help us. Like, we don't want this anymore. Like, that scared me straight. And I came to find out soon afterwards that my friend, like, he said he thought he saw a demon, but he could have very well saw a demon, in that form. And I had him draw me a picture, because he's an artist, he can draw and stuff. I had him draw me a picture of what this demon looked like, and it was just crazy, man. This whole thing was crazy. And we came to that realization at that moment that we're like, oh, we never want to do something like this again. And like, that scared us silly. That scared us straight. It scared us straight. We're there shaking before God, repenting for what we had just done, realizing the depth of that. Like, we're like, we just opened up. Like, we just entered into the spirit realm, and we were definitely oppressed. We were definitely feeling the influence of demonic activity. So, like I said, that's been my first ever LSD trip. How I ended up taking the LSD, how I got introduced to it, and what it had done to me to make me realize I never want to touch this stuff again. So I swore on my life, like, okay, I'm never doing this again. Like, that was just so intense. That scared me straight. I'm not ever trying that again. But I still continued to smoke weed. But I kind of swore to myself that I'm never going to do this drug again. Like, I'm never going to mess with that again after that experience. So I went years of my life after that not even thinking about doing those drugs, not even thinking about touching psychedelics or LSD or whatever. Years of my life without it. And then at one point, again, I came to this place where I felt like led to trying psychedelics again. And I found a connection to get me some mushrooms. I never did mushrooms, so I was like kind of curious about trying mushrooms. And like I said, this was years later. I was still smoking weed every day. I was addicted to weed. I'm gonna do a video about that. So I think just like me continuing to play around with doing drugs, even like stuff like weed and drinking alcohol at times and stuff like that, it led me to a deeper curiosity where I said, oh, I kind of want to try shrooms. So, I found that connection to try shrooms, and I was like very cautious and careful. I'm like, I don't want to like do like I don't want to make this too intense. So I'm gonna take, like, I had like an eighth of 3.5 grams of shrooms. I'm like, I'm just gonna do like maybe half the bag, and I just want like a mild experience. It didn't really make me trip out like that. I did half the bag, and then I ended up doing more later on, but I didn't really have, like, I wasn't tripping out. Like, I didn't have like these strong hallucinations like when I did that LSD. But it opened that door for deeper exploration into these kind of drugs. Like the same guy that I got the shrooms from was also pushing LSD. So like he was trying to like, influence me to try that again. And I'm like, oh man, nah, like I don't want to do like I'm not going back to that. Like I'm not interested in the whole LSD thing. But sure enough, guys, it's crazy to think about because I really swore to myself I'm never gonna do this again after that first experience. And lo and behold, I ended up trying LSD again. And this just set me off into months of using psychedelic drugs, from shrooms to the LSD to even trying DMT one time. And that no, like I'm so glad I'm not messing with this stuff anymore because it did really send me off into months of doing these psychedelic drugs. And I tell you, like, I did have some like eye opening experiences. I did like have some life changing experiences, but I also had some really horrific, like, deeply dark experiences. Like, they call them bad trips or whatever. But no, like, this came to a point where, like, I mean, I just became like like almost just schizo or something. Like I entered into psychosis, and I was like, my mind was not well after doing some of these things, and I became suicidal. My mental health really just drastically dropped. It just drastically went down the tubes. But I had some horrible experiences, like on these drugs and doing the mushrooms thing. Like I remember specifically one time having like a nightmarish experience on the mushrooms where I kind of like saw a vision of someone like putting a shotgun in their mouth and killing themselves. And it kind of like clicked at that moment. I kind of realized like why some people might commit suicide and check out of this world, because it can feel like a trap, or this world can feel like too much to bear. Like it feels like a lot of people compare it to the Matrix. A lot of people compare it to like some kind of like twisted system that's just so broken. People are hooked on things. It's just like such a broken world. And I could understand at that moment why someone might decide to commit suicide. So it really just shook me, guys. I don't, a lot of people might, some people might get mad at me for trying to say like, oh, psychedelics made me suicidal, or psychedelics led to me having suicidal thoughts, or it really like messed up my mental health. And some people might argue and say, oh, well, bad trips can also be good because it can like break your ego, and you can have like you can have a learning experience through the bad trips. And it's like, oh, you can't blame psychedelics for having suicidal thoughts. Like, you can't put the blame on that. But and I can't, I really can't fully pinpoint whether that was the direct cause, like if the psychedelics were a direct cause for me to have suicidal thoughts. But I know that it was like an influence for it. I know that it was part of the reason for me to get to that state in my mental health. So I know some people might get mad about me saying that, but I know for me personally, like it affected my mental health in a negative way. I'm not afraid to say like, hey, these psychedelics really kind of messed with my equilibrium state of mind, body, and soul. And that's not even going into some of the spiritual consequences of taking these kind of drugs. Like I've heard multiple times in other testimonies of like, when you take these kind of drugs, you're making yourself vulnerable to the spirit realm. You're opening doors. You're messing with powers and principalities that you can't see. And it is real. It is real. And like, people can argue against that and they can say whatever they want, but I firmly believe that it affects your spiritual state, it affects your mental state, and it affects your physical state in various different ways. So with all that being said, I've come to the conclusion that I'm not going to be messing with these drugs. I haven't messed with these drugs in a lengthy period of time, well over a year and a half. I haven't touched these kind of drugs, and I don't plan on doing that anymore. From the various experiences that I had. Um, but like I said, guys, that first ever LSD trip had me shaking and trembling in front of God. And I feel like a fool that after years of going, never touching the stuff again, I swore to myself that I'm not going to do those things again. I actually ended up falling into months of using those psychedelic drugs again at a period in my life. And this was years ago, where I was spending months of my life using these drugs on a regular basis. But it's also been well over a year that I haven't even touched these substances. So I'm back on the right track. I feel like I'm back on the right track to just staying sober, staying away from using psychedelics. I haven't smoked weed in almost 2 years now, so I'm not as vulnerable or influenced in that way like I was when I was smoking weed every day and stuff like that. So I don't even feel pulled. I don't feel tempted to do those things. I don't want to trip out. I don't want to have that scary experience again. I'm set. I'm straight. I'm all set with that. I'm on a new path. God has protected me. He saved me. I ended up in a mental hospital first time ever in my life, in 2021. And I've just gone through some stuff because of my bad choices and my using my free will, even as a born again Christian, to partake in this use of drugs. And I had to learn the hard way, guys. I had to learn the hard way. And I'm trying to just encourage you and prevent you from having to learn the hard way. You don't have to go that route. You don't have to go down that path. You don't have to do those things. Take my word for it. It's not worth it. Someone could try to convince you otherwise. They can say, "Oh man, try a microdose, or try this psychedelic. It'll change your life. It'll make you feel new again. It'll make you feel better. You'll have an amazing experience, and your mindset will change. And like you'll do, like it's amazing." And for me, it felt like the ultimate enhancement drug. Like it felt like my mind, like at certain times, it felt like I was able to have physical activity, exercising good. I was like doing all like I felt like a superhuman on this drug. But that's also part of the deception, because someone can try to convince you and say, "Oh, like you're gonna feel like you can exercise better. You can feel like you can meditate longer. You can feel like you can read books more. Music will sound better to you. Food will taste better." Like all these promises, but that's part of the facade. Like it's part of the deception, because in the end, you end up coming out changed, and it's not always for the best. And you could also find yourself going down a path where you start now wanting to use these drugs more and more because you liked how they made you feel, and next thing you know, you're hooked on something and you're doing all these drugs and you can't seem to get off it. So don't even go down that way. Don't even mess with that, guys. Honestly, it's just better to stay sober. That's what I if I had to make a choice between being high all the time or being sober all the time, I would choose being sober, because it's more authentic. You have more control over what you do. You're not under the influence. It saves you money, it saves you time. There's so many benefits to just being sober. So if you're tempted or you've been thinking about using drugs like that, listen to my experience and take my word for it. Don't even go there. Don't even mess with it, guys. You're better off not messing with it, because it can take you to a place that you don't want to go. It can take you down that dark hole. And that's what happened with me. Like I said, I had to learn the hard way. So I'm trying to prevent you guys from having to learn the hard way also. So Alright guys, I'm going to talk more about my story and experience with certain kind of drugs and stuff, but that was my first ever experience on LSD. And like I said, what it did is it left me trembling before God, repenting. So yeah. That shook me straight. Um, Thank you for watching, guys. Thank you for listening. I know this was kind of one of the longer videos, but I appreciate you taking the time. Oh, and by the way, that's what I forgot to mention as well. Like, because my friend, this has had to stay with me for a long time because the friend that I gave the LSD to, he was never the same afterwards. He was never the same. He kind of like almost turned schizophrenic. He also started experiencing suicidal thoughts, and he just went to a dark place. Like he wasn't the same. He was like out of his. He just kind of got out of his mind. And I mean, this friend, distanced himself from me, so I haven't talked to him in years. I hope he's doing better now. But after that experience like that really kind of triggered something in his mental state where he wasn't the same. Like it's scary to think about because now I had to live with the fact that I gave my friend this LSD. I influenced him and encouraged him to do this drug because it was almost like I wanted someone to do it with me. I didn't want to do this alone, and I even might have been so deceived at the time that I thought, oh well, he's gonna have a good experience. I want him to be able to experience this cool and unique time on the drug, and it ruined his mental state in such a big way, and he just was not the same afterwards. And I had to live with that guilt of saying, like, I was the one who gave this to him, like I was the one who influenced him to take it, and this is what it did to him. So it really makes me almost sick to think about because, like, I wish I never even went down that road. I wish I never like got involved with those kind of drugs. And it does mess things up for you. People are gonna argue and say, "Oh, well, it's changed my life in the best way," and that's not what I experienced. And it does wonders for me. And I like psychedelics, and I like doing these drugs. It brings me closer to God. Whatever they want to say about it, they're gonna try to argue to the moon about why they want to do psychedelics or why they think psychedelics are good. But you know what? You don't know what experience you could have, and you're better off not even finding out because it could really take a turn for the worse. And that's some of the experience that I had. Like I went down a dark road with these things. So uh, I hope you get something from this video, guys. I hope it's touched you in some way, and I just pray that God blesses you and keeps you in the name of Jesus Christ. Love you guys. Peace.